Hello and welcome to this panel discussion. G'day, I'm Jennifer. I'm a FinTech consultant based in Sydney, and I'm really pleased to be moderating this panel on the disruption in the Australian banking sector. Joining me to discuss that are three CEOs who are leading this disruption, so I'd like to introduce them to you now. First of all, Dominic Pym from Up. G'day, Dom, how are you doing?
Hi Jen, how are you? Good, thanks.
I'm good as well. Second on the panel, we have Robert Bell from 86400. Hiya, Rob.
I'm well, thank you. Pleasure to be joining you virtually.
Yes, the virtual challenge. I think we're getting better and better at it as circumstances require us to. And the third member of the panel is Steve Weston from Volt. How are you doing today, Steve?
I'm great, Jen, and good day, everyone. Hope you're all going well.
Thanks, Steve.
Now, first of all, if you are not very familiar with the Australian banking sector, if you were to do some research on it, you'd find a lot of column inches and a lot of discussion of this Big Four. The Big Four are the four systemically important banks who between them have 80% or thereabouts market share, and in some circumstances, in some product market segments, even higher market share. And there's a bit of a saying in the market that Australians are probably more likely to break up with their partner than they are to break up with their bank. So if you didn't know our market, you might be forgiven for thinking that we only have four banks, there's no other choice. Well, actually, we have nearly 100 choices already when it comes to doing our banking. So my first question to the panel is, what did you see in the market that was a problem that wasn't being addressed? And a backup question to that is, why did you personally decide to be part of the solution? So first of all, Steve, could you give us your thoughts on that, please?
Yes, Jen. I think, look, there's thematics that have made the introduction of neobanks around the world. They're consistent, changing consumer behaviour. We are now living more of our life on smartphones, and that includes banking. We've seen in most geographies around the world, these oligopolies had formed and customers weren't getting a good outcome. And then added to that was a breakdown in trust between banks and the communities they serve, which really drove then governments to say, look, we need something different for our countries. And they put in place measures that would enable startups to get banking licenses in most countries for the first time in a very long time. That happened in Australia as well. And then I guess if you look at technology, most of the incumbent banks are working on older technology. There was an opportunity to bring new technology to the table. So I guess the thematics were similar in right around the world, including Australia. Australia actually come a bit late to the party compared to some other places. UK is our most similar market, I think, to Australia. I was working in the UK at Barclays Bank in London for 4 years up until 2016. So I'd seen the early onset of the neobanking regime in the UK. Got back to Australia and it was like, wow, we are in the same movie as the UK. We have all of the same sort of conduct and reputational issues that the UK had. They just hadn't bitten in Australia. Well, they have since. And I set about working on some sort of disruptive play in financial services. Getting a banking license at that time, 2016, was probably a step too far. The barriers to entry were too high. And then in one really, really important evening in Australia, it was the 9th of May, 2017, when the Australian government really kind of went and got the last remaining missing jigsaw puzzle pieces from UK banking and dropped it into Australia. And they called for an open banking review. They introduced bank levy and a few other bits and pieces that had been copied out of the UK. But most importantly for us, they introduced a new process which would enable you to get a restricted banking license, so very important for Volt. Reduce the amount of capital that you would need to hold day one, not ongoing, but day one. I watched that announcement live on TV and I remember it. I still have the hairs on the back of my neck standing up because it was like, I know what comes next. And it was that feeling, if it's not you, then who? And if it's not now, then when? And I didn't sleep that night. Within a couple of weeks, we had a dozen people from all around the world had joined, and they're still on the team today. And that's our story of Volt.
Fantastic, Steve. That's a great story. So I heard you talk about trust. I heard you talk about technology, and also that you had some great experience from your time in the UK that you could bring to the Australian market. Rob, how about you and 86400? Why did you decide to start a bank from scratch?
We looked really closely at the data, and it was really clear to us that things had changed dramatically in Australia. People ask me, why does Australia need another bank? And I actually say all the time, Australia does not need another bank if it's going to be exactly the same as all the other banks in Australia. So the things that we saw in the data were more payments being made automatically out of people's accounts than ever before, more subscriptions, more Australians having a relationship with two or more banks. So a home loan over here, a transaction account over here, a savings account somewhere else. And actually making more transactions in a day with cards and virtual wallets than people have ever made in the history of banking. And where that left people is feeling anxious and stressed about money and not on top of their money. And so we set about to use the best technology to help Australians take control of their money so that they're not feeling anxious about money, not feeling stressed about money. And so, we wanted to use technology to actually help Australians take control of their money. And that's been driving us from day one. That's driven the prioritisation we've given to features, the prioritisation we've given to products, and the way we've gone about building it. So for us, it was really about creating a very different bank to what's available in the Australian market, providing all the things you'd expect from a bank, but also delivering products and services that people hadn't even thought about yet. And that's what's been driving us to create something that's genuinely different to the big banks.
Perfect. Thank you, Rob. Yes, I think it's really interesting that if we've got 100 banks and they're all the same, we don't really have choice. Difference is important. And at the moment, with so many people doing online payments, I think payments have become even more invisible than they were before. So that ability to stay on top of your money and that feeling of empowerment and control, I think, is really interesting. And Dom, up. You have been doing fantastic things. Your customer numbers rock. How did you come to be part of this?
Yeah, so we all have an origin story, and ours is similar. Obviously, lends on the same elements in terms of changes across the whole market. The perfect storm that Steve described, and then also the things that Rob talked about. So I think that for us, we already build. My company is called Ferocia, and we did a collaboration with Bendigo Bank, and that collaboration meant that we were able to bring up to market without having to get our own banking license, for example. And it's the first of its kind to do that in Australia. And the regulatory scrutiny is just as hard whether you're operating in a collaboration as if you're operating as a bank. We have to meet all the same requirements, and we have the financial claims schemes to protect people's money and all the rest of it. But for us, our company Ferocia, we were actually working with a couple of the big banks in Australia and some other banks around the place, and particularly in Asia, trying to build new digital banks. We had a project to build a digital bank across 10 countries. They move so slow. So to pick up on the points the other guys made, is that the big banks offer the same solutions, and it's the world over. And what neobanks have really brought to the world is this different way of thinking, this technology-led perspective, this different way of solving problems for customers. And so for us, it was, how do we partner with Bendigo rather than get our own license? How do we deliver value for our customers that they're not already getting from the existing incumbents? And really our mission was to set about to be the #1 bank for under 35s in Australia. And that meant that we were building a very specific product that is different than any of the other banks, because they're all offering a very broad product. They're not targeting on a very specific audience. So for us, it was, well, if we can be #1 for under 35s, what do we need to do? And who's currently #1? Who's #2, 3, 4, and 5? And then focusing our energy as software engineers on using technology to solve problems has worked fairly extraordinarily. And as you mentioned, we've had a very strong uptake and a lot of growth in the 18 months since we launched. But also, I think for us, it's been developing what I call the new trust, or the new trust, is that customers have to actually want to switch their banking over, or if they don't switch, they have to want to try whatever it is you're offering. So one part of it is having the perfect storm. The other part of it is offering value. The other part of it is doing something different. And then, of course, the customer has to trust you. So we were very proud just a couple of weeks ago to be listed in the top 10 banks in Australia that customers are trusting. And so obviously the only Neo that's listed in the top 10, but for us, that was a really important sort of measurement of the traction that we've been able to create. So I think they're all the sort of key elements, the collaboration, number one for under 35s, being very frustrated with the big banks and their moroseness and inability to actually, get stuff out. And then going back to our mission in life is to help people, get from a place where money is a cause of stress and anxiety to a happier place where they feel empowered and in control. And so that has to drive what we do and the roadmap and the way that we deliver customer value.
Fantastic. Thank you, Dom. Yes, I think there's an interesting combination of push and pull factors at play in getting people to try a new way of banking. I'd like to talk now a little bit about some more of the specifics that you've had to organise to be where you are today. So, for example, getting the talent, getting the tech, getting the licensing and other regulations, getting the customers, and getting the capital. So out of those 5, is there one in particular that was frustrating, was joyous? Can you talk a little bit more about these factors, and starting please with Rob?
Oh, look, thanks. Look, talent is a great one. I mean, we've got some incredible developers on our team. Every single one of our 100 team are, although we've got deep banking experience, they're all digitally native. They're all passionate about technology. They love using the latest tools. They enjoy creating new things. That hasn't been a problem for us at all. Technology has been a big advantage, starting with a fresh piece of paper, having no legacy systems, being absolutely laser focused on the few things we want to do well has been a big advantage for us. But I think the big one for us was actually getting a banking license. And there are different models in the market. The reason we got a banking license and did all the hard work for that, because this is a long-term play here. We want to be a serious player in banking in Australia. We weren't interested in just being a sub-brand of a big bank. We actually wanted to create our own journey. So there is actually no value in itself in a banking license. You're right, you can borrow someone else's. But we felt that to create our own destiny, to create a genuine alternative to the Big Four, that we needed to go through that process. So getting that full banking license and launching. But at the end of the day, it's the customers that drive you. I review our NPS scores and feedback every single day of the week, and they are incredibly uplifting. You get really excited. You get this incredibly positive feedback. And then every couple of ones just kind of rips your heart out with the extra things they'd like to see us do that we'd love to do next week instead of next month. So it's really, for me, that, putting on so many customers every day of the week and then getting that feedback and seeing the great positive stuff, but also seeing all the ideas come through and realizing that we've just started. We've only just scratched the surface about what's possible. That's the bit that sort of really drives me, and that's the bit that's exciting at this point in time.
Fantastic. Thank you, Rob. Steve, how have you been traveling at Volt? Is there any one or two of those elements that really resonate for you?
I think all of them, and it actually is like a journey. When you are applying for a bank license, and Rob and I shared many war stories there, it is so hard. There cannot be anything more to building a bank than getting a license. And then you get the license. And then Dom and I had many, many discussions on technology. Bloody hell, how hard is this technology? I thought this was the new world. So, and then you overcome that, although you'll always be building technology. And then you have to pay the bills. So no capital, no bills. It takes a lot of time to raise capital as a startup. We don't have a very mature VC market in Australia. Those things are hard. But all of those will pale into insignificance compared to your people. And we were very fortunate to be able to attract people at the top of their game, different industries, different countries. And often we will have talking to people from overseas or investors and go, is that the person who did the Bank of China re-platforming? Yes, it is. How do you get these really heavy hitters on your team? And a lot of it is about relationships you've had in the past, finding people at the right stage of their life where they want to do something different. They want to change the world of banking, and they may have paid their mortgage down so they can work on lower salaries than what they may have been getting, and all of those sorts of things. So we've been able to, like the guys I'm sure will have in their own businesses, been able to attract this wonderful talent tool that you kind of can easily think is it. The game is over, we're done, and it's off to the races, when in fact that's only part of the battle. You then need to create an environment where these super talented people can do their very best every day. That is something that's very easy to say and very difficult to deliver. But it is clearly the area that takes the most of my time and my attention. And it is the most important thing that I do, because it is your talent, your people, that will ultimately determine the level of your success.
Mm. Yes, I think that echoes some of the words of Richard Branson of the Virgin Group, who says, if you take care of your people first, everything else takes care of itself. I think it's a little contra-instinctive. Possibly a lot of people will think I've got to take care of the customer first. So that's an interesting perspective. Thank you, Steve. And Dom, how have you been finding those factors add up?
Yeah, so we're reflecting on where we started. We've been in the fortunate position to not have to raise capital. We're a self-funded business. We actually run the 5th largest bank in Australia, a banking platform in Australia now today, and we've been doing that for 8 years. So that has sort of provided us with a cash flow, so that we didn't have to go out and raise capital in order to launch up. And so that puts us in a little bit of a, I guess, advantage. And that meant that we could focus on the things that the guys have spoken about, which is technology, customers, and talent. So for us, culture and team is absolutely number one. I have to, echo those points. It's been about pretty much finding the people that we know and trust and that we've worked with before, or that have this great track record, and they have the passion for the customer. So the customer really gets the customer benefit and value and engagement gets driven out of our people. And people say to us all the time in the industry or amongst our customers that it bleeds into the product experience, the people behind the scenes. Now, we're all software engineers, we're all developers, designers, and people focused on solving problems. And what that ends up happening is sort of manifesting itself in your product and your brand. And so it's easy to say, we're building this for customers, and customers are centric, and customers are, at the front of our mind, and, yes, sir, no, sir, 3 bags full, sir. We actually think that's bullshit. Like, we actually think that the customer is the critical element, the glue that holds it all together. None of us would be here without customers, but we can't build value for customers without great people. And so the people are actually the center of the onion, and then all the rest sort of builds out from there. So often we talk about technology as well, and we're a technology company, and we've again been fortunate to partner with a bank, and so we haven't had to build an entire risk team or an entire legal team or an entire sort of financial modeling team or financial management team. We've been able to focus on, say, for example, reducing our sign-up times, or delivering our first response to customers in less than 2 minutes. We've seen billions of dollars flow in deposits and billions of dollars flow in payments. And being able to deal with the customer service side of it, and having great people to deal with the customers so that they walk away telling their mates or whatever. So about 50% of our entire growth is just people referring to their mates and just referring to their family and friends. And it's because they've had a really awesome experience. They get that awesome experience because of the sort of convergence of design, technology, and great people. You put those 3 things together and put them in the blender and mix them up, and that's how you sort of create that sort of, the magic that we're all sort of striving for and that we're trying to create. And so, yeah, I think that for us, the customer engagement has really been the measure of success. So when we look at the introductions that we all provided saying, okay, well, we need to do something different in the market, most banks in the world, but particularly in Australia, will measure, okay, well, are we the primary financial institution, or are our customers engaging at least once a month? Are our customers putting in, 1 deposit a month? We actually measure how many happen in a day. Like, we're interested in customers that make, multiple purchases a day, or customers that will deposit their salary or make regular payments on a regular basis. So we don't really look at, okay, do customers do 1 transaction a month? We look at, do customers do at least 1 transaction a day? And then we also interact with our customers in such a way that it's a conversation. We're pushing information and insights and meaningful stuff to them, and then they're providing back to us transaction flow and capital and deposits. So that sort of symbiotic relationship with the customer is how we differentiate from the other banks, because the big banks measure in a very staid sort of way, and they're not looking at engagement as much as we are. And just one little example to finish with is that a lot of digital banks around the world have said, right, we need to be the primary financial institution. We need people to deposit their salary just to survive. We've got to have a strong deposit base. We've got to launch credit products. We've got to be able to generate a margin. So we're in a fortunate situation where nearly 50% of our customers are depositing their salary or their wages or a regular transfer to their account, multiple times a month, and doing that in sequential months. And so that level of engagement is really the secret sauce. People aren't going to become advocates and become passionate about your product unless you have great people, great technology, great design, and great engagement.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Dom, for that.
No worries.
Can I ask now, can you tell us a little bit about how you chose the name? And also, since this panel is entitled Disruption in the Australian Banking Sector, is there something you've either already launched into the market, or can you give us a little bit of a feeling as to what is coming up that's going to be really innovative? As I've heard Steve talk about raising eyebrows with surprise and delight. So the question is, how did you come up with the name? And what have you done or are going to come in the product roadmap that's really going to surprise and delight us? And first of all, back to you, Dom, please.
Yeah, no, I think it's pretty exciting times for all of us and all of our businesses. And there's a lot of new things to do. And if we just did the same things that all the other banks have done and just did it slightly better, I don't think that'd be enough to sort of get us out of bed in the morning. So for us, the first step for us was publishing our public roadmap. We call it the Tree of Up. And it's quite unique in the way that it sort of looks like a tree and it grows over time, but it provides a level of insight into everything we've done, everything we're currently doing, and all the things that we're planning to do in the future. Maybe not all the things, but all the things we're prepared to share publicly, obviously. And I think that has been for us the first step in having a transparent communication with our customers and with the market. So obviously these guys can see that, all of our competitors, all the incumbents, everybody can see what it is that Up is doing. But I think that was the first step for us in demonstrating who we are and what the brand stands for. When we first launched, we actually had a different name, and we decided to change the name, and even that exercise on its own was an interesting one. But for us, Up was a word that it implies, positivity. It's a really simple, easy, natural word. So one of the challenges that we all have in naming things is that all the good names are taken, getting the domain name or getting the trademarks or whatever. And so often what we find, particularly in the neobanking and the startup scene, is a lot of made up words and things. And so we started with that, with that idea, but we moved quickly to a natural word that's, that Up is a very easy word to use. But it came with its own challenges. So you can't trademark the word Up, for example. That's specifically called out in the legislation as something, you can't trademark. Also, we have to compete with Disney. They have a movie called Up, and Microsoft have a cloud-hosted platform called Up. So when you want to buy assets or whatever. So there was definitely some interesting origins of where the name Up came from. But by having the triangle and by having the very simple natural word, we've just got a level of engagement where I can walk down the street and I can see someone wearing an Up t-shirt or an Up hat or whatever and get a high five. I don't even know this person, but they just love it. They just feel it. So I think that, that's the first point, is the transparency of the roadmap, which feeds into the brand. And then my last piece is going back to customer. And customer for us is not just something that we say, it's something that we do. So for example, during the pandemic, we launched a webinar series, and the first one was a couple of weeks ago, which was just for anyone, didn't have to be our customers, just anybody who wanted to join. And the first one was about mental health, and we just got some experts on board and we moderated a session, and it was really, really successful. The second one I actually just did last week, just a few days ago, and it was about financial literacy. And we had a financial planner, a financial advisor come on the show, and we had thousands of people joining just this live stream. And it was such an amazing feeling for us, is that connectivity, that engagement with customers and non-customers for that matter, a lot of the people that registered are not currently Up customers, but we wanted to provide that benefit beyond anything that other banks would contemplate. And so it's not a product feature per se, it's more a heart of who we are. And then if you look at the public roadmap, you can see all the cool features like joint accounts or credit products or, whatever the cool features are that are coming soon. But that's not I don't think that's the key point. The key point is, what do those features represent in terms of transparency, engagement, and just betterment of mental health or financial literacy or whatever it is.
Perfect. Thanks so much for that, Dom. And Rob, sometimes maybe people overseas might be a bit confused by the name. Perhaps you can talk a little bit about the name and also in terms of innovation and things you've done that you're proud of that are going to surprise and delight your customers.
Yeah, so look, 86400 is actually the number of seconds in a day. The name came from one of our software engineers, which seemed appropriate. We were effectively sitting around talking about the purpose of what we were doing, and the idea was we wanted to use technology to help Australians take control of their money every second of every minute, every day. And our lead engineer at the time said 86400, and we all looked at him and said, what's that? A quick Google search, it's a number of seconds in a day. It just seemed appropriate. We did a huge amount of then research around every other alternative to the name, and just came back to the one that we came up with in the first instance. And if you're at a trivia night, you'll know that answer to that question now, and you'll win the meat tray. Look, in terms of innovation, look, we've taken a tech. We've done all the basics of banking really, really well. Like, you can't ignore the basics of banking. Joining in and getting an account, being able to use it within 2 minutes online through the app, that sort of stuff. We've done those basics really, really well. But we've also balanced that with, kind of features and products that are genuinely innovative. And the one that I'll use as an example is our Energy Switch product. So we're bankers, we're in banking, and we've delivered a product that's helped thousands of Australians already save significant money on their energy bills. And this is not a product we make any commission on, but it's a product where we've used technology to look at thousands of data points for energy plans and give the customer ability in seconds within the app to change energy providers and save real money. Because people forget, bankers get all caught up in, I want to give my customers 10 basis points extra interest. And they forget that it actually makes very little difference to an individual customer. It might make $1 or $2 difference for the entire year. But through a product like Energy Switch, we've been able to deliver hundreds of thousands of dollars back into our customers' products in just a couple of months' time. I mean, the average savings that our customers are getting is around $300. That's immediately straight in their product. And so the fact that we were able to do that really quickly, really innovatively, deliver it through the app, it's just an example of what banks can do to help people take control of their money. We don't make any commissions on it. We don't, we've got no biases in the product, but we do ask people that when they make a savings to share that with their friends. And that's been great for us, and people actually are talking about it and sharing about it. So it's like a little bit like Dom was saying, the majority of our customers are coming from customers who are already getting a great experience. So that's an example. We've got lots more of those products. We'll continue to build the basics of banking and do it better than anyone else. Definitely better than the big four banks. But we'll continue to add lots of those new features that people just don't expect or haven't seen before. And we'll surprise people. And that's the balance that we're really working on, is just doing banking way better and then delivering features that genuinely help Australians take control of their money.
Thanks so much for that, Rob. And Steve, can you please tell us, why is Volt Bank called Volt? And I'm quoting your words back to you. I remember seeing you present last year, I think it was at the Australian Financial Review's Banking and Wealth Summit, and you talked about the eyebrow raising factor. So can you tell us what you've done, or maybe give us a little bit of a clue on the product roadmap, what's about to come for us?
No problem. So the name Volt first, there were our initial dozen team, and we had to come up with a name. And we didn't fancy ourselves as too creative, and we didn't have any key marketers at that time. So we went and worked with an agency, and they had this tried and tested methodology where each of the staff got 3 stickers, a red sticker, amber sticker, and a green sticker, and they'd come up with all these names with their characteristics. And the idea was you'd put your green on your first choice, your orange on your second, and the red on the one you most disliked. And theory had it that you'd end up with a couple of pockets of concentration, and they're the names that you would go and do more work on. Well, we were like a shotgun. There was no sort of commonality as to who had which names had the green, red or amber stickers on it. So we were scratching our head. When we went to move into the premises that we are now in, underneath a stairwell was hidden this big bank safe. And one of the guys said, what do you think of the name Bank Vault, V-A-U-L-T, safety, and all of those sorts of things. And then the play on words, phonetic Volt, V-O-L-T, meaning energy and potential and the like. And we all liked it. And that's a long story short. He never got a pay rise for it. He's still part of our team today. And he reminds me regularly that Volt was his doing. So that's the Volt name. And then in terms of something that we are doing that is different, the big part of Volt really up until this point has been a stealth play. And that is we have architected our technology in a way that will not just service customers opening accounts from smartphones, but also working with partners. So large firms who want to offer banking products to their customers, but they don't want to become a bank themselves, or they can't become a bank themselves. And we've got a number of these firms that are working through our hopper at the moment. We've announced a handful of those. And I think the eyebrow raising was to do with one of those, PayPal, who are a partner of Volt's, and they have 3 other banking partners of our type in the world. And they are with Citi, Bank of America, and my old employer, Barclays. So when the 4th partner was Volt Bank, people were saying, who on earth is Volt? And that largely remains a stealth play. But the most exciting thing I've seen for a while is watching customers of partners in their customers' ecosystem opening up Volt bank accounts. So they were doing something in one of our partners' apps, and they were able to open Volt accounts from the partner app. So I think that really is the future of banking, and that is something that we have designed. I go back to when we were designing Volt, we really looked at what would customers want from banks in the future, and that's what we have gone and built and will continue to evolve. What would banking technology look like in the future? And Dom, you may recall a conversation we had probably 3 years ago, which was kind of, it was a genesis of thinking in many ways. And then we looked at the Australian banking landscape and said, where are the areas a digital bank could out-compete the incumbents? And you'll see that they will be areas that we will bring to the market sooner rather than later. And some of those products are ones you wouldn't naturally associate with a neobank. And that was all part of the design, but really excited to get out and about. And I think all of us are. This Corona period's an interesting one. I think undoubtedly that is going to be a positive for all of us. We are seeing more people now staying at home. Even the demographic that would typically use bank branches are now living digitally. And whilst they may not have seen themselves as a typical digital customer, I think will in the future. And for those neobanks who are going to get into lending, coming in with a clean balance sheet without all the bad debts to worry about is going to be an enormous asset. So I think really bright times ahead for neobanks, not just in Australia, but globally.
Yes, I think there's no going back from digital banking. And certainly I think it's not just in Australia, but globally, people are not going to go back once they've taken those first steps. And Steve, they're hearing you talk about the connectivity and the interoperability. I think once people experience some of that as well, they're really not going to go back.
Yeah.
So I think that pretty much brings us to the end of the panel discussion. It's been a real pleasure for me to be the moderator. Thank you so much to the panel members. Thank you to Dominic Pym from Up.
Thanks, Jen, it's been great.
Thanks also to Robert Bell from 86400.
Thanks, Jennifer. Always a pleasure.
And thirdly, lastly, final thanks to Steve Weston from Volt.
Thanks, Jennifer, and good to see you, fellas.
Yeah, it was great to have the chat. Thanks. Good to see you guys. All the best.
Thank you to everyone watching the Future of Banking live event. It will be our pleasure to host you in the beautiful city of Sydney, hopefully in November later this year, when we look forward to the Future of Banking event. Till then, I'm Jennifer Harrison. Thank you and goodbye.